everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you are new and just finding us for the first time, thank you very much. Hope you will like what you find here. Click that subscribe button below, like the video, share it on social media. You know what to do. For those of us returning, thank you very much for the continued support. And today, we are working on something not old and rusty and full of Bondo. We are working on the other evil, the BMW. Now, in full disclosure, this is the first, what I would feel, non-routine maintenance thing that I've had to do in this car in 2 years of ownership, being a 10-year-old almost BMW about to roll 100,000 miles. And I should find some wood to knock on because I'm thinking I'm just jinxed myself. But what we've got is what I believe is a broken spring in the rear. Now, how do I know that? Well, let's see. It's got a little bit of a creaking sound. When I go over bumps, kind of a creaky, crackly sound. Doesn't sound like it's coming from anything inside because there's nothing really in the car except me, kids, and a pair of car seats. And secondly, coming up from the shop last week, I saw the car was sort of tilting to one side a little bit towards the passenger side. So that got me looking underneath and I saw a cracked spring. Another way to tell this pretty easily here. If I had my tape measure, I could just grab that. But instead, I'm going to grab my T-square and set it up along the wheel well. You'll see on the passenger side here, we've got just over 28, about 28 and a quarter clearance from the ground. And again, you can take your fingers and stick them in here as well and see what you have for clearance. Now, I'm going to try and get as close to center as possible. And I can get my fingers in here and I'm just touching the top of the fender here. If you go over on the driver's side, now if we take a look at the driver's side, I'm looking at 28 and a half. And if I stick my fingers in here, I'm not touching this at all, but I'm touching the tires. So clearly, I have something sagging on the passenger side. I did go ahead and rock the car back and forth, or side to side rather, to make sure I wasn't getting any sort of uneven settling of the car. So I went ahead and ordered up some new springs from FCP Euro, and they sent those out to me. Not sponsored, paid for them out of my own pocket. Thank you very much. And here they are. They've got two options. I can find them, but these were the actual OE springs. And they actually come with the same part number and sticker that the ones on the car have. They had another OEM name for a little bit cheaper, probably third the price or third off. These were about 80 bucks a piece, so I was out the door with shipping for about 170 bucks, I think, is what it came to. But the other brand they had, I had purchased those for the other BMW we had with broken springs. I didn't quite like those. They were a little stiffer. They weren't the sports springs, but they were a little stiffer than I would have preferred, but that's what it was. So is it a thing with BMWs to break springs or about 100,000 miles? I mean, I guess I'd rather replace these than transmissions or timing chains and stuff like that. So we'll get to this. All right, I'm back. It was pretty clear once I started taking things apart yesterday, that I was not going to get the spring changed in an hour before I had to go to daycare. So we're back here the next day. And I'm sitting in the back of the car because we need to take the back of the car apart. Yes, it's actually, compared to the 07 X3 that I had, with this actually has a strut combination spring shock, whatever you want to call it, configuration versus the old Beamer had a separate shock and separate spring that I could just pop out, move on with life. Not so much the case here. So what we're doing is taking apart the inside, and I've already gone and taken apart this little cubby tray thing, which seems kind of useless other than to hold your gallon of milk. This trim panel here, and now I've got to get this piece off here, there is another piece of fabric back here, sound dampener or whatever, I need to remove because that's going to allow me to get to where I believe the top nut is for the stuff back there. And I did a little more looking around. You can't really see it from here, especially with no lighting. But I didn't actually see the brake I thought I saw up there. We'll take more of a look when I get it off, but I did see, well, I didn't see a break in the spring, which I thought I saw earlier. Maybe it was just sitting right where I couldn't see it. But I do see that the bottom two coils, let me show you here with the new one. So it looked like the bottom two coils were sitting on each other about here. So regardless of whether the spring is broken anywhere along here or not, it did look like these two were rubbing on each other. I mean, you've got nearly an inch there, and even without any load on it, even being compressed and in the car without a load, I would not expect these to be touching. We will find out, but let me go ahead, start tearing apart the back of this here, and we'll see what we find. All right, so we've gone ahead here and taken apart as much of the back as we need to. I could have taken off this entire side trim panel, but I didn't feel like it. So we've got three 13 mil bolts here, I believe. And if you'll notice, I did go and round them in Sharpie because I honestly don't know how much stuff here is aligned by bolt placement up top here. Probably not much, but it's done. And down here underneath, we should have a 18 and 20 mil nut and bolt combination here to hold on this lower control arm. And then the shock itself, I believe, is 18 mil. So I want to go ahead and drop this arm, and then the shock should come out once those three bolts up on top are removed. Now you notice here, it's kind of hard to see now, you'll see it more when I take it out, but there is a kind of a center, it's a 6 mil, they said, Allen that goes in there to hold the shaft in place for the shock, and then you've got a pass-through socket, which I of course don't have. So for some strange reason, I don't have a 20 mil socket that I can find. I don't know where it is. So I will advise against doing this yourself. But with the wheels already off the car, I'm kind of stuck here. So that might end poorly for my hand. Okay, so I got this out here with the nearest poor decision I could find. That's your 13/16 standard. Fits on there well. Now, the one thing you want to know, when you pull these things out, you can see they are oriented, however you want to say it, to fit on here a certain way. And that is going to help with the alignment. So when you put it back together, you want to make sure it goes back on the same way. So when your bolts are tight, these are facing the same direction they were when they came off. Otherwise, you're going to have an alignment issue, and you're going to have a bad day. So what I need to do now is put some pressure on here to be able to get this bolt out. Then we'll be able to drop our shock out. Now, to save those of you who use headphones, I simply knocked this out with a drift and my dead blow hammer, and a little bit of extra support with my other jack helped get this out without having a lot of pressure and chewing up the threads on the bolt. So now, let me show you this. What I mentioned about this bolt, you can see is weirdly shaped. Basically, it just means when you put it back together, you've got to make sure that this washer here lines up with it, and that they line up in the hole over here. And you'll be able to see the wear pattern or where the dirt was. So when you put it back together, that's where it goes back together at. All right, now we've got this. This should be just a pair of 18s. Nope, that's a 20 there as well. Not a whole lot of room here. All right, we got our suspension bolts out here. Ended up taking a little bit of never stuck bolt penetrant stuff. Rocked that back and forth, got it out. And our arm is down here. Our shock should be able to slide right down and out. There we go. Oh, yeah, yep. Oh, I was right, 100%. Oops, look at that. Sorry, I was right. It's tough to see it before, but look at that. Right there, there is our brake. Look at that. Snap, crackle, pop. That is definitely why it is making noise in the back. Now the rest of the shock assembly here, yeah, the bellows are shot. We'll see what it looks like when I get it apart. I should replace the shocks at the same time maybe, but maybe, you know, if this shock looks like it's horrible, I will find a couple replacements for it and wait on doing the other side spring as well until I get the shocks in place. But I've got this one out. I'm going to put in the new spring at least, and that's going to help greatly. I know you should replace these things in pairs. So we're going to take a look at it, and if this shock is still in good shape, I'll go ahead and replace the other spring as well and do the shocks another day. If this one is not good, I'll take the advice of, you know, you should really replace these right now and put it back together. Why? Because I don't have parts on hand. Let's go back over to the workbench once I get that mess cleaned up and take a look at the spring and shock broken thing. Alrighty, well, we are back. We found our special socket last night. Took a Hail Mary, call the neighbor up the street and said, hey, do you have one of these 18 mil pass-through sockets? And I'm thinking, nah, he's a Ford guy, he's a tractor guy, he's gonna have big stuff, American stuff. He looks at the toolbox, he goes, well, dang, I've got one, come on up. So I went up and got our wrench, and oddly enough, he got these for his tractors. Now you're thinking, red tractors, green tractors, those should be American, right? Nope. There's something wrong with that, but you got it. Hello. So basically, now that we've got it, this goes on here. We have a 6 mil Allen that goes in here, and that holds the shaft tight so it doesn't, of course, swivel when you try and loosen this nut. So we're going to go ahead, undo this. I threw some penetrant on it last night, so I'm going to go ahead and get it started, then put on my spring compressors, and hopefully it doesn't blow up in my face. Oh, there it comes. There we go. Basically, we put our spring compressor on. So basically now put one on the other side as well, and we'll compress these down. And this is something that can be very dangerous, so make sure you are not pointing this assembly at your face in any way, shape, or form once you've got pressure on these. These can fly off. They can send parts everywhere, so make sure you are taking precaution with this and you are wearing safety glasses. Serious, no joke. Now, I'm going to say this once, and I'm going to say it very firmly. Wear safety goggles with this. Do not point a loaded spring at your face or anybody or anything. These things do get under a high amount of pressure, compression, whatever you want to call it, and if they slip or if something moves, these things can come flying off. The spring can come catapulting off of your shock. Bad things can happen. You've been warned. If you want to see it, go out and look for other stuff on YouTube. I'm certain there's at least 30 or 40,000 videos of these things failing and people and things getting damaged and hurt. So I emphasize, wear safety goggles. Do not point this at anything or anybody you care about. Now that we've had our PSA for the day, you know, this is broken. Not a lot of pressure on here now anyways, but you can see this spring is bent here. So I'm going to actually move, shucks. Try and get the other one on here. All right, you can see I've got these on here loosely right now. go ahead and slowly tighten these up just a little bit to get them seated. But again, since this spring is already broken, there's not going to be a whole lot of pressure on here, just enough to make it still somewhat dangerous. So go ahead and find my glasses, put those on, and start to slowly crank down on these. All right, I've got some pressure on here. We'll see how we can go to get this pulled back a little bit. It looks like I don't need that wrench at this point, or that Allen at this point, so that helps. All right, you're coming off nicely. I'm gonna throw a little more pressure on here because when this cap comes off, it's gonna go whoomp, right into you. All right, now down here at the other end, I can see the bottom end of the broken spring is not touching this rubber mount down here anymore. So I should be able to finish taking this cap off and not send parts across the shop. There we go. Just a little bit of pressure still in there. We got her. Well, here's your cap. So the top of the spring sits in there. Good to go. Now you want to notice on here, there's a couple little triangle shapes here. When we put this back in the vehicle, you want to make sure that this is still pointed towards the back of the vehicle. And that's just how it came off, so that's how I'm going to put it back on. Now, here's our shock. Let's move you. How's our shock? Is that still shocky? You know, that can probably be replaced. That should be pushing back out now. So, like I said earlier, this is the case of you should probably have all the parts on hand you think you'll need. I didn't have shocks, so I am putting this one back together with the new non-broken spring. Then I'm going to order the correct shocks for this. I'm not going to do a video on it because pretty much you're seeing everything right here you need to see. We will go ahead and get the new shocks in here, but for us, for me, coming up this coming week is Thanksgiving, probably close to Christmas for you. Either way, we are not going to have anything speedy delivered, so I don't think I'm going to be able to find these locally for less than an arm and a leg. So I'll go ahead and just put this one back together and then swap it out with new shocks once they come in. So we're going to use our old stuff that's already on here because we have it. We've got our bump stop, a little bellows thing there, protector deal. Anyways, let's go ahead back to the topic at hand. Let's take the pressure off this spring. Glasses back on. I did not want to use the impact when I compressed these springs. I didn't want to have any extra vibration cause those compressors to possibly shift and pop out. So that's why you saw me just using a hand wrench to tighten it and the impact to loosen them up. So they were already loose enough. There wasn't enough pressure on it anyways. But let's hold on a second here. Let me show you what I did find. So this is our broken coil here, and that would have gone right down here. Oh, where did it go? In here somewhere. There we go, kind of like that. So you see how much we're losing here with that coil gone. So definitely an important part of the car. Pull this off. Now let's take a look at our new spring. So if we stand them both up, you can see There we go, they're both in the same orientation. Now you can see that brake definitely has a significant, probably 1/2 to 3/4 inch difference in the height of these two. So, the old one gone. Now these, again, I said work from FCP Euro, and they did come with the factory BMW tags on them, so that is nice. And this is, there we go, tag does specifically say this is the top side of the spring. And there's also, let me show you, a specific place where the bottom of the coil will slide into, right in here. So when you're reassembling it, make sure it goes back up against this stop. There's only one direction it really fits in. That crap out of the way. There we go. You can see right there, goes and fits right in place. Not back here, not over here, but it has a nice home it sits in right there. So when you're putting your top cap back on your spring, there is a mated surface again for it, just like the bottom. So when you put them both back together, make sure that that end of the spring fits in that little slotted spot here. So whatever you want to call it, recess, fitment point, whatever. But that goes on there, then everything fits back just like it should. For now, grab my glasses, go ahead and get the spring compressors back on here and get it ready to put back together. All right, folks, well, I've got this thing under a lot of pressure. You can see when we started, these were all the way down here. Now I've got a good 3 inches. And I've got just the top of my nut sticking out, so I'm going to see if I can get it on a thread or two without cross-threading it. Seems like I can, so that's good. So we at least have some backup if these things slide off, but so far it hasn't. So I'm going to go ahead, keep getting this tightened down a little more, get this nut on here tight, and we'll be able to reassemble it. All right, I guess I could have panned down a little more, but we're in there all the way, and you will know when you hit the end because it will bottom out, and you can't over-tighten it. You can't go farther than you should. So now I'm going to go ahead and carefully release the pressure off of these compressors, and it'll be good to put it back in the car. All righty, so now if you remember, we need to have these triangles wherever they are, right here. These need to face towards the back of the vehicle, which is where you are. And if I slide this up from underneath, see if I can set this in place. Oop. There we go, he's in place. Now you need to go up top and see where this lines up. See if this works a little better. All right, there we go. We've got our 3 holes that should pretty well line up. So I need to go ahead and just jack up that, that lower control arm a little bit to get these to fit up in place. This is where a second set of hands might be nice, but hey, use what we got. What I've got is a second jack. Now remember I said earlier about these black Sharpie marks on here, so we can help make sure everything is aligned where it should be. Alrighty, I'll come back and get those torqued down to where they should be, but they're in there for now, and we're gonna go ahead back to the bottom here and see where we're at. Now we got that one in there already, so now I've got to work on the control arm, big bolt in the back here. Lift her up again a little bit. I don't want to damage my threads. There we go. Now, if you remember what I said, this goes back on in a certain direction. And this high part of the washer needs to be pointed straight up. You can see how that lines up. You can set our nut back on. And I still have to worry about the front. Also needs to fit in the same orientation with the high side of the washer pointing up. We're almost there. All right, I've got the back or the front side of it in. I just got to rotate it up to where it was before, which of course pushes this back. So let's undo that, because I need to make sure this washer also fits back where it came from. Okay, you're in where you should be. Without moving the front, without moving the actual bolt itself. All right, I'm gonna go check the torque specs for this and for the shock. Then we'll be able to get this thing off of the jack stands. Torque specs for the lower control arm and shock, I'm seeing mixed things between 18 and 40 online, so I'm probably just gonna give it 35 pounds, ugga-dugga, and be done with it. These I was able to find for 24 pounds, so I'm gonna go ahead and lay them down. There you go. They're right there. I already had them in there pretty much where they went. There we go. You know, of course, all this stuff is going to come off in a week or two again, so I'm not going to show you putting the tire back on, because really you've seen that before in mine and probably countless other videos. But, you know, in short, put the tire back on, tighten down the lugs, cross pattern, drop it on the ground, tighten the torque, check it after 50, 100 miles, whatever, you're good to go. So that's gonna wrap this one up here. It's, you know, it was a simple job to do. It takes a while to get to the actual part. That's kind of how it usually goes, but it wasn't a complicated job. Now you go to a shop, they're probably gonna charge you an hour of shop time minimum, probably 2 hours for each corner you're going at, and depending on the shop you go to, probably 70 to 120 bucks an hour. They're also gonna charge you retail price for parts. Looking online, local parts vendors alone, the non-BMW parts were going for, you know, $115, $120 per shock, without the spring. If you wanted to go with the generic brown box spring and shock combination, you're looking about 180 bucks a piece. So if you're doing them in pair, let's just say 200 bucks with tax for the part, 150 bucks, let's just say 200 bucks per side. So you're looking at roughly $400 per corner you're working on here. So 800 bucks, probably a rough estimate, a little higher, a little lower, depending on where you're going. And I got my springs for 160. Shocks are probably going to be around that. So if I'm going to be all in around the $400 range and cut nearly half the price out of this, and I had one tool I had to go borrow. I'll buy one of those myself now. But really, if you've got the ability to turn a wrench, this is not a challenging task. I do know this does not have any of the sport suspension or the electronically controlled suspension. Those parts are vastly more expensive, probably almost double for the shocks. Springs are still going to be the same price, roughly, but the shocks will be considerably more expensive just due to the electronic goodies in them and all the other stuff that makes them electronically stabilized and adjusted. My point being, this is a job you can do in your garage safely, cost effective, and it doesn't take a whole lot of special knowledge or tools. All right, so that wraps it up. Again, another case where you can do some simple repairs at home for a fraction of the cost of going to the dealer or a shop. Really, it took a couple of tools, a jack stand, possibly a second jack or a bottleneck or a bottle jack, depending on how your car is configured. But really, to do this type of work, it's very similar across all the different cars. Hope you've liked this. Hope it's been informational or helped you out in some way. If it has, don't forget to hit that subscribe button below, like the video, tell your friends about us, and we will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye-bye.